Hey everybody, welcome back. I wanted to show you a new modern way of doing a geode cake. Now I know geode cakes have been around for quite a while now, but I wanted to change it up and do a more modern version with a square cake and handmade rocks and crystals that I made using Isomalt. So I'm going to show you all of those steps here. First of all, I started making my Isomalt. Now, I used a bag version of the Isomalt with this one here. So you just add your water to the pre-made Isomalt crystals. You can make it from scratch, and some of my crystals were made from scratch. I did two different versions, but I didn't film the handmade ones. But you can do either way. This is just a little bit easier or a little less time consuming. Doing it from scratch took me a good 45 minutes just to make the actual candy. And you need to heat these up. You can stir them a little bit just to make sure that you get all of the crystals saturated. And you can pretty much just kind of walk away and let it get to the temperature that it needs to be. I'll link everything below. But once you get to a certain temperature, you can add your food coloring if you want to add food coloring. A little bit goes a long way. And I just kind of stirred it in and then let it just get to the right temperature. Now, once it got to the right temperature, I transferred it into a measuring cup with a spout because I thought it would help get the syrup in there a little easier. Now, this is very hot. Very hot. I probably should have used gloves while I was doing this, but I have done this quite a few times, so I just kind of know to keep my hands out of the way. Just pour it slowly into your mold, and those molds, the taller one, I wrap a rubber band around it so that it does not squeeze out through. There's a crack you'll see here when I unmold it. You want to keep that mold in place. You put it in your refrigerator or freezer until they firm up. And the glory of these silicone molds is that the release is pretty easy. You just kind of loosen it up and then push it from the bottom. See, now here you can see that it's almost two pieces put together. And this one's a little harder to get out. You have to kind of wiggle it around a little bit to loosen it up because there are pieces in the middle that go up through it. And they're a little harder to release. Now to get the haze off of them and to release any air bubbles that might be still stuck in there, use a torch and torch them just to get the shine and the haziness away. And I'm doing the same thing for this sheet of Isomalt that I somehow lost the footage of me pouring, but I just used the rest of the Isomalt and poured it onto a silicone mat and let it firm up also. And I'm going to use that to make my own rock candy. Basically, you can buy rock candy with it, but with everything being in you can't find anything now. I couldn't really find locally the color I needed. I wanted this blue color. So I've decided I was just going to make my own. So let it cool and then bang it around real good. Be aggressive. I know the footage of this is a little jumpy. It's because I was banging on my table. No other way to do it. And you can see on the one side that what I made from scratch, and then this I made with the Isomalt, the pre-made kind. Now, I made a video already of how I filled and stacked and frosted this square cake using just cake boards that I cut to size to get your sharp corners. I will link that video on here as well so that you can go back and get all the fine details on that because there's quite a few details. I used chocolate buttercream with the yellow cake on this one. In hindsight, kind of wish I had done 5 layers of cake because I did want it a little bit more tall, a little bit more of a bang for your buck, impressive cake, but can't go back in time. And this is just my crumb coat. I wish I could work this fast in real time. This took a lot of time because with square cakes or any geometrical shaped cakes, there's a lot of going back and frosting and then firming it up and then going back and filling in again. It's a multi-step process. But this technique does help eliminate a lot of that going back because you can be a little bit more precise with it. You have some guides. You have a board on the top and you have a board on the bottom, and you fill in between them and just try to make sure you get those square corners. And this is just my first coat of buttercream. I was more concerned about filling in the gaps at this point. I do go back and then fine tune it. It took me probably 3 or 4 times of going back and fine tuning it till I got it where I wanted it. And this is after I had set it in the freezer for 10 minutes to firm up. I went back and put another coat. Just spreading that around and then going back. Firming up those, or crisping up those corners again. A key also, besides having those 2 boards, is to use your scraper almost flush with the side of the cake as you're removing the excess of the buttercream, because otherwise you're pulling it, and you can pull it in from those corners, the side corners, and you get indentations almost. You don't get a straight line. So pull it instead of, or scrape it instead of pulling, I guess, is the key. And now here I am crisping up those tops. Crisp is the only word I can come up with. Getting those sharp corners on the top as well. As we know, I'm a fiddler, so I cannot leave well enough alone. And with frosting, pulling in the frosting on the top, I like to do the corners first and then do the sides. I find that leaves those corners filled in better than pulling that frosting from that corner where you've got 1, 2, 3 different sides meeting at one place to form one corner. It's hard to keep that buttercream there. So I used a sharp knife to score where I wanted my geodes to be fit in. I wanted it random. I wanted it uneven to look slightly more natural. I didn't mind getting rid of some of these corners. I don't think it takes away from the look. I think it adds to it. And you just cut right into the cake and pull that section out. Clean it up if you need to. And you can see the board is sticking out a little bit on the bottom there. You can cut that out. I did go back and cut that out with an X-Acto knife. But if you leave it there and you fill it in with rock candy, I think it would be fine too. Now starting with a little bit and then taking more is kind of the way to go with this. You don't want to take too much because you can't put it back. But you also don't want to be afraid to take enough so that you get a more extreme look. If you're going to do this, you want people to notice it. And I did cut into the top also. I have a hard time getting all the angles because, like I said, it's just me and my phone. I haven't purchased a fancy camera or hired anybody to help me film these videos. So I can only show so much at a time. It's a lot of moving your camera around. And sometimes you just want to work on the cake. Sometimes you just want to make pretty things. You will see in the pictures at the end where I did cut into the top there. See, here's where I'm going in and removing that board. Also, keep in mind when you are carving away sections of the cake, leave enough so that you don't mess with the structure of your cake. You don't want it falling over. But I think you'd be surprised how much you can take out and it stays fine, especially if you're refrigerating your cake, which I highly recommend. Maybe not a semi-naked or naked cake with no frosting on it, but if you have frosting on your cake, it's sealed. It's airtight. There's a big misconception about that. Refrigerating it for a few days is not gonna hurt it. Use simple syrup and make sure it's covered with buttercream. At least a crumb coat. And then you can put plastic wrap on it if you want. So here I went ahead and filled in a little bit of buttercream to cover up the cake. And I'm starting with the darker color in the middle. I did have 2 shades of blue with the 2 different batches that I made. And I'm doing the darker in the middle and then slightly lighter outside of that. And then I did the clear around that. Now the clear I did buy at the store. I found that on Amazon. And Honest Engine, it's fine, but I kind of wish I had made that from scratch because it was cloudy. I suppose they have to, because if it's not cloudy, if you make it and you ship it, it will stick to itself. So they have to have some kind of a coating on that to get the rocks to not stick to each other. But that makes it a little cloudy. So, pick your poison, I guess. Now this took some time too, because I am placing these by hand, one at a time. Sometimes two at a time. And sometimes I try to put one on and it falls out. So 0 at a time. But just stay patient. Make sure that you have enough time to work with it. You don't want to forget all of them. Since I have these smaller ones, I wanted to find a place to put those. But I kind of had a hard time finding a good place to put them. So I ended up only using one of all of those, the smaller ones. Kind of wish I had been able to use more. I probably could have, but I didn't want to overdo it either. If you hear kids in the background, I apologize. My windows are open. It's a nice day outside today. I did manage to get one in there. Like I said, I wish I kind of had room for more, but I tried, but it was overcrowded. Right here, you'll see me trying, and it just didn't work. Sometimes less is more, right? I used some piping gel to get it to stick to the board. Oh, here's the back one that I almost forgot to fill in. And it wasn't big enough for the bigger stone either. Try to use that fan brush to push those rocks in there because there's an awkward angle. It helped a little bit. Make sure you don't put your buttercream on too soon before you get too far in advance before you get to putting the rocks on, because it'll crust over if you're using American buttercream and it will make it hard to get them to stick. Now here's where I put the big rocks on top. I don't know if you'd call those stalagmites because they come from the bottom up. My husband's a geologist. Stalactites hold tight, so those would be from the top down. So stalagmites. You don't care. Anyway, put those on, and then I used some more of the rock candy to fill in around them. And I even sprinkled some in between the middle and the top, like right there, to just look like a cluster, like a geode cluster. And I used edible silver leaf to edge out these cutout sections. To get these to stick, you can just brush a little bit. It was still a little wet here, so I didn't have to wasn't completely dry. I didn't have to do a lot here, but I end up towards the back, which took me a little longer to get to. Add a little water. Oh, there I'm adding a little water. To your buttercream is all you need to get the car going by. All you need to get the silver leaf to adhere to the buttercream. Tweezers are a good way to get the silver leaf on. I just use a brush this time in my fingers. Do this random. Don't do it too... You don't want to have like... drawn lines of the leaf. You want it to be more random and sporadic. It should look more natural. Sheesh, I had to shut that window. That was ridiculous. Anyway, back to the cake. So I did this all the way around on all the edges. I may add a little bit of background music on this video. I don't know, because there's a little bit of downtime where I've already explained what I did, But it seems like when I add music, I hear a lot of, your music was too loud, I couldn't hear you. Well, it's kind of hard to edit the music down enough on YouTube. They only give you or just very few settings on how the level of your music. So that's why I've kind of steered away from doing the music in the background. I decided to put a few on the very front, which I thought was pretty, but in hindsight, honestly, I think it might have been prettier without them, because really, what is the front? This is one of those cakes where it's hard to decide what the front is. You might not want to display it with just that side forward. You might want the corner forward, and then you only have the leaf on one side. So it was either go do it on the other side too, or just leave it on that one side. And I didn't want to overkill it. And I didn't want to take it off. So I left it. That's up to you. Personal preferences, right? And again, I just used water on the cake, brushed on a little water, and then pressed the leaf onto that very lightly. And this is random also. So this one was really fun to do, guys. You might see other versions of this in the future. Who knows? But thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, comment, share, do all the things, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.